Hello and welcome to episode 76 of Just Keep Writing,
a podcast for writers
by writers
to keep you writing.
I'm Marshall.
I'm Nick.
I'm Brent.
And I'm Will.
Gentlemen, it feels like it's been a long time, but I think just because Brent was away last time, I think is why it feels that way. But We're back together, the four of us. I'm really excited to get into the conversation for this week. But before we do that, since that last event, we've had a nice influx of listeners and patron subscribers. So I would just want to give a big shout out to those of you who reached out, gave us a couple bucks for doing what we do. You get writing prompts, access to the Discord, and all kinds of other stuff. So thanks to everybody who's done that. And we can't thank you enough for giving a little bit of what you have for what we do. So it's a big, much appreciated. So before we get into the rest of it, though, anybody else got anything else going on? I feel like it's been a while since we've checked in.
So since I disappeared for a little bit, yes, I have had two things come up. So I was recently on the podcast Fansplaining, and that's basically a fandom podcast. And the two hosts, actually one of the hosts, I was on a panel with her for the Discon. I don't know what it was called last year, but the Hugos basically last year, and we had a panel about fandom, and we really kind of hit it off. And so she stayed in touch and was like, "Hey, you want to come on the podcast?" I was like, "Sure." And so basically, if you like fandom stuff, if you like fan fiction, I basically talk about how I went from being like a fanfic writer to being like an original storyteller in science fiction and fantasy. So it was kind of cool getting to talk about that journey. And then
what was the name of the show again?
Fansplaining. Yeah. Instead of mansplaining, you know.
I got you. I just want to make sure I heard you right.
Yeah.
that'll be in the show notes as well.
Yes, definitely. And after that, I had a YouTube interview with a booktuber, Thistle and Verse, Chloe Wiggins. She invited me on to her YouTube channel to talk about my short story work. And yeah, it was a really cool interview. I got to talk about kind of, how I approach social media with both Fiyah and like my own personal brand as an author. Then I got to kind of talk about like, we talked about one of my older short stories that like I have complicated feelings about, but it was interesting getting to kind of talk about that and actually parse those feelings out online. And then, we talked about X-Men, talked about different kinds of things. So it was a really good interview. Check that out too. We'll put that in the show notes as well. And so that was it for me. Hopefully, I don't have to do too much more talking this year. I don't think anyone's trying to drag me on for stuff, but both of those were really cool.
That's awesome.
Is that it? No one else has anything going on?
I got school.
Yeah, you and me both, brother.
Yeah. That's about it. We're doing finals right now, which is great. We'll be done by the 8th of December. And we're boring, Marshall. Well, there, I said it.
Yeah. No, they're boring, but busy as hell.
No, I am proud of y'all. Y'all doing a great job. And
thanks, Brent.
You are going to be exceptional writers by the time you're done with it. Not that you aren't already.
I hope so, because I keep taking a risk week after week, and it's exhausting. I'll just say that.
Well, I can say this with affirmation now. Like, I can actually say, like, this is from a pro editor's perspective. Having sold the book now, I can say that you all are, having read each and every one of your work, that you are all much further along than you think you are.
It means a lot, man. We appreciate it.
You said you sold a book. Are we allowed to talk about that yet? Or
I thought we did.
Yeah, Malka.
Yeah, we did.
On the show. Yeah, we did talk about that. Yeah,
we did.
We've talked about it on the show.
Yeah, we have. I think so. Yeah.
Man, I'm like keeping my mouth shut about it because I'm so excited for her. Like,
you could totally talk about it. It's on tour and everything.
Oh, Malka's amazing. I cannot wait for this book from you, Brent.
Well, I mean, honestly, she made it easy. So,
well, Nick, your memory's going, and this is kind of what the episode's about. PTSD.
Oh, boy.
Nice segue.
Let's talk about
So,
anyone ever heard of TBI?
I bought a house there. So,
TBI?
TMI. I thought you said TMI.
No, I said TBI.
I'm about to say, you bought a house there? Like, that's a story. But
okay, everyone. So today we are going to interview our co-host founder, Nicholas Bright. And he's never had one just... Okay, slow your roll. And he's never had an interview with just him. But specifically what we're going to talk about is that Veterans Day is Thursday, which you will hear this on Friday, which is the day after Veterans Day. But Nick is a veteran. And we're going to talk about his experiences, how it informs his writing. And then we're going to also talk to... Brent later in the show of being someone who was raised in the military. So, Nick, are you ready for this?
Am I allowed to be myself now?
You can totally be you. Just be prepared.
Oh, that's right. It's Will asking questions.
Yeah, the girl master, apparently.
I'm a cry is what I'm getting at here.
I really am not trying to make everyone cry.
No, you're not. I literally cried during a movie earlier today. I've cried at least twice a week when I'm watching some show with my wife, and I throw a pillow at her and be like, "I'm not crying. You're crying."
We watched Into the 11th Doctor last night with my kids, and I cried in both last 2 episodes. I mean, don't get me started. Anyway, continue.
Thank you. So, Nick, I'm going to ask you a question that we ask a lot of our guests, and I want you to describe your writing journey in 3 words.
Fast. I should have known this question was coming too.
How are you not ready for this question?
I know, right? I listen to every interview. I'm here. So I would say fast, tremendous. I'm going to go with that. Educational.
All right. So let's break down those words. Let's go with fast. Why'd that come to mind? Because that was the first word you said.
Yeah, fast. So I've dabbled in writing over the years since I was in middle school, elementary school. Never took it seriously. And then the cancer came, and then I said, cool, this is what I'm doing with my life. And from that point, I graduated. Within 6 months, I'd gone to 4 workshops and conferences and kept that pace up until COVID. I had written 6 short stories in that time frame. Post-COVID, so coming into 2020, 2021, finished a book, put a ton of stuff out on submission and got nice rejection letters back on stuff. And so for me, in a short amount of time, I've learned a ton, but I'm just moving fast as I can up until recently.
Okay, and we're going to unpack a couple statements that you made just previous, but I want to wait. I want to talk about tremendous.
Tremendous. I mean, to me, this is such a big opportunity, such a big world that I've been able to be a part of, and the people that I got to meet. So it's just been a tremendous experience for me to be able to be a part of all your lives and being able to share parts of my life in the written word where I can't express any other way.
And let's go with educational.
Man, you're always learning. Always learning. I know I'm in school right now for a master's. However, your educational journey with writing doesn't stay with writing, I feel like. You're educating yourself as a person, for me, as a father, as a husband, but also now I'm educating myself as a white male, in society, and I'm learning different things, and I'm constantly learning. I'm changing my opinions based on what I'm learning, based on new facts and new things that I'm finding out. And so I feel like, my writing journey has taught me a lot more in the last few years than I had the previous 10.
So I want to go back to what you were talking about, because we know you, the 3 of us know you. We know about your cancer, and you've mentioned it briefly on the show, but it seemed like that was a really big pivotal moment for you. you got your diagnosis, and then you said you went to like 4 different workshops. But the writing, from that statement, it seems that there was always this spark of you loving story. And can you kind of talk to me about, like, it's not like you just got cancer and you were like, I'm going to be a writer. Talk to me about the way that story has affected you. And did you write when you were a kid? Did you write while you were in the military? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it was 2nd grade. It was a class assignment. We had to write a story about a teddy bear that goes to the moon. And what did they find? And I got into a little speed contest with someone else of who could write the most pages in the amount of time that we had. But it turned out like I just really enjoyed making stories at that point. So I had known since I was a little kid that I liked it. And I always kind of, like I said, I dabbled in it. I'd write a couple pages here and there of something and then move on to something else. Never really focused on anything. High school did come, and I got into poetry a lot. Because what else does a young man who is hopelessly wanting to be in love and not finding it do, right? You write poetry for people you don't know yet. So I got into poetry a lot, and I did a couple short stories. And what I was writing then was really, for my age, it was a little darker. A lot of loneliness was coming out of me, and I didn't realize it then, as I do now. And then, adult life came, and you don't know what you're doing with your life and stuff like that. And eventually found myself in the military, and wasn't really writing in the military at all until towards the end, when my first cancer diagnosis came through. So, and that was 2014, 2015. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and that's when I started writing again. Because it was a dark and lonely hell pit for me, especially being in the military. I had support on the face and on the surface of everything, but I didn't have anyone there for me. Like, no one was there when I woke up from surgery. Like, no one called me. No one texted me. And as much as my family wanted to support me, they weren't there. They let me call them, and I let them know what was going on. And it was at a point I didn't even tell my mom I was going through surgery or anything like that. Like, she didn't know. So I kind of cut myself off from everyone. So it was a pretty dark place, and lonely road that I had taken at that time.
So I wanted to talk about when you were in the military and just what you said. You had people on the surface. Talk to me about your military experience. And the reason I'm asking this question is what people who are listening don't know, that, they haven't read your work like we have. Your military experience has greatly influenced what you're writing, whether it has been conscious or unconscious, right? You have been really writing from this really beautiful place of your characters suffering some type of PTSD, right? And when I say beautiful place, I mean by that you're coming from a very honest place, from a very nuanced place. You're not just giving a character a trait. You're really coming from a really like beautiful, raw, and honest position. So first, let's talk about the military. What was your experiences in the military, and how has it influenced about what you're writing?
Man, that's a good question. So my military experience, right? I joined at 22. So I was the old guy that joined, and I joined the infantry, which you're a bunch of ground fighters. You're first in, first out, with the army. And so my job was to be the best at killing other people, at killing the enemy and destroying what they had. So you train for it, you deploy for it, you're rewired to want to fight all the time. You're rewired to look at enemy combatants as just that, combatants. They're no longer people at that point. And I know there's some people that are going to be like, oh, the military isn't trained that way. Like, No, it is. It's why we call her the targets that we shoot at Ivans because of the Cold War, right? It's why we called our targets that we were shooting at Hajis. Like, you're trained to hate your enemy in a way. And it's all very, very subtle on how they do it. And it's more of a culture thing of people just being angry at the situation that they're in that kind of sparks some of that stuff. So I'm a very emotional person. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I was an easy target for a lot of people in the military. I remember basic training, we did an exercise with my squad, and they're like, tell the honest truth to another person in your squad. And someone walked up to me and says, you don't belong here. You're too emotional and too weak. And that hurt. It stung like a little bit, but kind of vindicated like our drill sergeant at the time and said, what are you talking about? What do you mean he's too emotional? There's like, he can't handle any of this. Granted, I had never had a problem in basic training with any of that. Yeah, I missed the girl I was dating at the time, but that was about it. But then my drill sergeant was like, who are you going to talk to when your best friend dies? Who are you going to talk to when your leg gets blown off and you can't walk anymore? He goes, no, this guy, being emotional in the military, that's your support system. That's the person that you're all going to turn to when shit hits the fan and you don't know how to control yourself. Is the person that's already dealing with that stuff and knows what they're experiencing and feeling. And so that felt kind of good, but at the same time, you're trained killers, so like you always go after someone's weak spot in their life. So I got picked on a lot in the military. I've been pinned down and had beer tried to be poured down my throat before. Something I actually haven't shared with anyone, so that's new. Just constantly berated and looked at as lesser in my early career. And so I think coming out of that, like, and obviously not including a deployment here, like you have some psychological issues from that. You have some worthiness issues of, are you right for what you're doing? Are you good enough to be doing that? Like, and some ego that goes with that.
So I want to talk about emotional support. And you just shared something that was really personal and poignant. Let's fast forward to the future for a minute. You've gone through the military ranks for how long before your diagnosis?
I'd been in for 4 years already.
So you're 4 years. Diagnosis. Yeah, you're 4 years, and then you don't have one person be with you at surgery. One, do you feel that is a product of the military?
Yeah, 100%.
Of not building connections?
No, it's not about building connections, actually. Because let's say I was dating someone and I got cheated on, or I was dating someone and they died or whatever, someone would have been there. But as soon as you are physically injured or mentally incapable of being combat ready, you're worthless. You're no longer good for the unit. And that is a giant stigma that people are trying to fight outside of the military after veterans get out. Because you're constantly being told, if you go to sick call, if you go to see a doctor, you're weak, you're broken, we don't need you. If you can't train, you can't deploy, you're a warm body that needs to go. So there's this huge stigma to taking care of yourself while you're in the military. And it's even worse for mental health issues than it is physical ailments.
So you're touching upon a lot. And like, I feel like I could do 4 more episodes about this. But the one thing that I really feel like comes into your writing is the PTSD, but a lot of it is the flashbacks of being in the military. Mm-hmm. And whoever's listening, you can take this, what I'm going to say is political or not, but war is unnatural, right? To see that type of humanity at its worse when you're at war is just unnatural. We are putting our soldiers through things that are just no one should have to see. And people want to stand up in falsehoods of, I'm with my veterans, I'm with my veterans. But when it comes to laws, when it comes to mental health, we see a lot of veterans be homeless, really struggle with PTSD. So I want you to talk to us and everyone who's listening about your PTSD as much as you'd like. And also, where you were stationed, where did it stem from and has it really affected you once you became a civilian again?
Man, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll just start where I can on that one. So I was stationed in Fort Carson, Colorado. I loved out there. First duty station. I deployed with the guys out there. Some of my better memories aren't from there, though. That is the unit where I came in as a private. Wasn't always afforded the best opportunity. Not afforded the best opportunities, but not always treated the same as others. Just because I was the nice Mormon guy, I didn't do drugs. I didn't drink. Like, I didn't want to get involved in illegal activities like the others did. And I'm saying all that, and people are like, "Wait, you're in the military. What do you mean illegal activities?" No, like, you don't get paid a lot and you're bored. Like, you find ways to entertain yourself and make money. Like, it is what it is. Then after our deployment, I came back and I was stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And at least there, I was able to be a team lead there, a fire team leader. So I did learn a lot of leadership experience and be able to help coach some of these younger guys underneath me, and kind of teach them different than I was taught, in certain aspects, and be able to use, what was being told to me that it was a weakness, turn around and use it as a strength at that point. I was closer to the guys there at Fort Polk than I was at Fort Carson, even though I deployed with them. And this is a little odd for a lot of people. PTSD is expressed in many different forms. I deployed in a never fighter weapon, never got blown up, nothing like that. I've had plenty of opportunities to do all those. And when you sit there and all of a sudden says, hey, basically battle ready, you get ready for a fight, there's a lot of anxiety that's going on. There's a lot of built up, pent up emotion that goes on in anticipation that, okay, shit's about to go down. I'm about to drop 300 rounds on this guy. And then you just sit there and you stare at him and you stare at him and you stare at him. Next thing you know, it's 2 hours later. Your adrenaline dump never happened. So that adrenaline stayed through your body and stuff like that. And so for me, my PTSD expresses itself in a couple different ways. One of them is I've had nightmares of people dying on my deployment that I'd never deployed with. I watched a platoon sergeant of mine be shot in the head 2 weeks straight every single night, to the point where I wasn't able to sleep and had to go see someone about it and stuff like that. I've seen family members die in war, in dreams and stuff like that. That's one way it's expressed for me. Another way that it expresses, if I'm put in a situation where I'm helpless, where I can't help another person, or I can't do anything to better the situation. And that one's a little bit different. We had a couple blind kids that we had in a village near us that we would frequent. And 2 boys, they had to follow their 13-year-old sister around. And they were treated like dirt because they were worthless at that point. They couldn't farm. They couldn't shoot. They couldn't do anything. They were reliant on a woman. Therefore, they were less than a woman. And if, Taliban culture, like, you're the lowest of the low at that point. And so anytime you try to help these kids out, walking sticks, books, anything like that to help them, Taliban would come in and just take it out. So so it forced them to be reliable on a woman, right? which is even worse for that family and how they were treated. So being put in situations where I'm helpless, like, I had a moment where I basically lost it on a train because a mom was in a wheelchair and her 2 kids were riding with her, and one of the kids fell down and hurt himself. Couldn't get, she couldn't help pick him up, and she was too far away for anyone else to help her. So, you got a crying kid who can't have his mom pick him up. And so that's a moment for me that really set me off, that, I struggled a lot with. I'm also an asshole at times. I'll say that too. And that's kind of part of deflection when I get put into certain situations where I go on the offensive rather than let someone else try to run the room if, they're acting a certain way. I also have to sit with my back towards the wall at all times in restaurants, or have an exit strategy everywhere I go. And then, talk to any cop, right? They do the same thing. Most military people too, they're going to do the same thing. Like, that's not an uncommon thing. But just the way that it expresses for me.
No, I'm the one who's crying.
Okay, I'm nice and red and flushed over here.
So let's talk about those experiences and then your writing.
Mm-hmm.
And is it something that has been very unconsciously into your writing, or did you consciously want to say, you know what, I need to take some of these experiences and I need to funnel this through my stories?
It's very purposeful. So my experience after the military taught me a lot on myself and others that experience what I go through. One of the big issues coming into the military that a lot of veterans face is they don't have a sense of belonging anymore. They don't have a purpose. They don't have a task anymore. You lose that once you lose the military. Because in the military, I always knew what I was doing. I always knew what I was working for. And it wasn't me that decided, it was someone else. So when you get out, you're on your own. You don't get help. You get talked to by a bunch of civilians right before you leave that you need to go to college, get a job, do this, do that. But you don't have a support network really afterwards unless you build it yourself or go out and find one. So having a sense of purpose is something that a lot of people struggled with. Personally, I didn't. I knew I had plenty of opportunities to research, do what I needed to do. When I was doing my cancer treatment, they basically pulled me and just let me do that. That was the only thing I did for 6 months, was get treatments and stuff like that. Didn't have to do anything else. So I already had a plan, got into school and stuff like that. And, a few years into school, I actually became a peer mentor for other veterans that were struggling through the VA in my school. And I worked with our veterans club at my college that I went to. I worked at the Veteran Success Center there. And so I got to work with a lot of veterans that we all have the same story, just a different shade, right? And you hear a lot of people like they can't talk to civilians about certain things because they don't feel like they'll understand them because they didn't live that same experience they lived, which is a very common thing. And Brent, you probably might have heard your dad say something similar, where he's not going to talk to someone that hasn't been through what he's been through.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
All the time, right? It's a military thing. Like, we don't believe that if you haven't been shot at, you're going to relate to my trauma. And to an extent, my experience has proven, yeah, that's correct. My experience has. But I know others, their experience, that they've been able to find people who haven't been through that same type of trauma. And they understand it, and they feel safe in those places. So with my writing, like I kind of felt like I've been through things, I've learned things. I'm very emotionally aware of what I'm going through. And so it helps me get through my PTSD, depression, anxiety moments. And so with my characters, I always want to have that expressed there, of having someone struggle with that and finding a way to deal with that, in hopes that maybe a veteran picks up one of my books, or anyone struggling with PTSD and trauma, that they read one of my characters, identifies with them, and realize I need help too. I need to do this just like this character did.
I think it's interesting what you said about PTSD and just having to be like battle ready at all times and what that does to your brain. Because a few things to talk about the brain. The magnetic resonance imaging, MRIs, they actually have shown, and it's been made possible for scientists to watch at the rate at which the brain develops, specifically for the male brain. And what research has actually found, and I can actually put in some links for the show notes about multiple different resources for everyone to read. So it's very well studied by a lot of different people around the world. Men's brains are not fully developed until the age of 25. We are putting 18-year-olds, and Nick was 22 when he started, and their brain hasn't already finished developing. We're putting them into these like battle-ready positions, and we aren't fully, when they are then released as a civilian. Are we, Nick, I'm going to ask this to you. In your opinion, do you feel that we are doing enough for our veterans when they come out of being in the military?
No.
What is the most common misconception by the general public when it comes to the mental health of soldiers?
That everyone has PTSD and we're unfunctional 24/7.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, so most of us who have deployed and have been to war have PTSD in some way, shape, or form. Some are mild, some are not, some accept it, some don't. I believe if you deploy, you come back with something. You are not the same mentally. There was actually a photographer that, for multiple units, she did pictures the week before they deployed and the week they got back and showed how much they've aged over a year. An 18-year-old looking kid going from a kid to looking like a 30-year-old man, just due to the stress and stuff like that. So I always feel like everyone comes back with something. But like, let's talk Hollywood real quick too. Hollywood fetishizes the military. Name a military character that was a normal functioning person day in, day out of their job and didn't have some tragic breakdown every 6 months on the show or in a movie where they almost killed someone or killed themselves. Like, it's just, I feel like Hollywood, in a sense, paints us in a certain light where we're just dysfunctional all the time. Or like we're not reliable. And the truth of the matter is, like, we suffer in silence most of the time. Like, you're not going to know like what's going on until someone actually says something. And going back to, we talk to other veterans. So unless you're a veteran, like, you don't hear about it a lot.
Do you feel that creates an insular culture that doesn't give you the tools on which to actually cope and work through your PTSD?
So part of it, I'll talk job market. People don't understand military skill sets. If I say, hey, I was a military leader for 10 years, I can manage a team. It doesn't matter what industry that is. I can manage your team because I have the skill set to work with different people, work with different personalities, and figure out how to get the job done, regardless of my personal experience. But that doesn't translate over into the civilian world, right? They're like, oh, military experience, that's cool. Like, you're awesome, you're a veteran, like, we'll talk to you. It gets your foot in the door to have an interview, but like the skill sets that you learn, obviously I'm speaking from the lens of a combat arms person. So unless I'm being a cop, my skill sets really don't transfer day-to-day basis here. I feel coming out of the military, you're not equipped mentally to handle it. Because one day you could go from I'm training to go to combat to A week later, I'm out of the military. Because the week before, they needed to hit their training numbers, so they had to put you in there. Like, there's a time period at the, your last 6 months, you're able to take 5 or 6 classes, hour-long classes, to help you prepare to get into the civilian world, but it's just not enough. Like, you need to be demilitarized at that point. You need to be able to wear what you want every day, do your job. You need to be able to figure out, like, what it is you want to do after you get out. You need to have that chance to sit down with a doctor and express what ailments you have with no penalty.
Let's bring this back to writing for a minute. I'm just trying to unpack so much of everything that you're telling me. When it comes to your writing, when it comes to writing, what are the things that you want to bring to light that we don't get to see? Or what is the nuanced conversation that we need to have when it comes to talking about the military to soldiers, PTSD, mental health?
That's a good one. Well, first, let's talk about soldiers, right? We're just kids. It's like if you're watching college football, we're just kids, but we're asked to do something that most people aren't asked to do. And so when it comes to the military, like, there's a lot of times, like, we're glorified because we're willing to die. And to me, if you sign up to be in the military, you just said, I'm willing to die for my country. Whether you are or not, like, it could happen. And I think it kind of gets over glorified that we're just kids trying to figure out life. And this was our best option, or this was our only option, or we were expected to do this, So I think when it comes to the military, hearing the stories that you hear, like, you got to remember, like, we're just kids in a situation, and we did what we felt was right a lot of the times. Obviously there's a lot of training that goes into it, but most of us didn't sign up for glory, for honor. If you take society and you put it into a barrel, we're at the bottom of that barrel a lot of the times. But some of us can float to the top. And those are the people that exemplify what it is, being able to sacrifice and stuff like that, and living up to the standard that people look at us. But we're just kids. We're just kids trying to figure it out, and we'll grow up in the military, and you don't really get the chance. I'll say this too. Most veterans I know, we hate, like, please don't do it. Don't thank me for my service. That's just a job. You don't go thanking teachers. They actually deserve it. You don't go thanking cops. Like, well, some people don't, some people do, but, like, to us, it's just a job. Like, there was days I just sat around and did nothing, and people would be like, thank you for your service. It's like, for what? I mopped a room today. Like, I didn't do anything great. And that's kind of overall, like, feeling a lot. People's like, I'm not doing anything great. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just doing what I should do, what I have to do to get by. It's a weird, like, and I think that's a military thing too, where, like, we don't really pay comments. We don't accept, like, the whole, you did awesome, you're great. Like, it's no, like, this is what we do. This is what we have to do. We accomplished the mission. We did it as a team. So taking on compliments and stuff like that has always been hard in regards to that. Because it feels uncomfortable. It feels awkward when someone says that.
My dad fought in the Vietnam War, and he suffers from Alzheimer's right now. So there's been a lot of things that have been coming out because he never would really, like, unless I specifically asked him, and I asked him this once, and this was only, like, I think, like, 10 years ago, before his diagnosis. And I said, he said to me, I'm so happy that you never had to go into the military. And I looked at him and I said, well, White Poppy, I don't understand. Like, you were always proud of it. He goes, I was proud that I did something for the country, but I'm not proud of the deeds that I had to do for my country.
I want to bring up a book. It's called On Killing. It's about the psychological cost of going to war. It is by Dave Grossman. I believe he's like a colonel or something like that, retired. But it's talking about the unnaturalness of killing when going to war and what it does to you. And there's some thoughts out there as well that PTSD is an injury. And I think he kind of touches on this too, that you can heal from all injuries. So that's a good book to check out to get a better understanding of what it takes to get to the point to, be able to take a life.
So I am going to move this over to my other co-hosts, Brent or Marshall, and if they have anything they want to ask Nick, because I actually have a list of questions, but we're just not going to be able to get through them because there's just so much to unpack. And I think instead of, for me, to constantly just keep asking my questions, I think I personally, and I hope people who are going to listen to this will actually just sit and replay this episode and just listen to what Nick has talked about his own experience. Because when you actually hear a lot of these experiences from the veterans, to me, it brings so much the gravity of what we ask our young men and women to actually have to go through. And we need to start asking ourselves bigger picture questions as a people. So, Marshall or Brent, it is all you.
Do you want to go, Brent?
If you got some, Marshall, you go first.
No, there was something that you said early on, Nick, that got me thinking a little bit. And it's probably because I teach teenagers, and the bullying part of it, I find really, for writers out there that are trying to write different experiences, and it doesn't have to be military, but just, when you're writing a bully character, or, what do they go after? You said you were older, so they came after you and they said you were too emotional, right? So I've had a lot of students who have gone to the military, right? And a lot of them were bullies going into the military. So I'm just curious, and this is just something that's been just bouncing around in my head. I don't know how that translates. I don't know what happens, from I'm a bully in high school to going to the military. Do you see where I'm going with this? So essentially what I'm asking is, from a writing perspective, if I'm going to write a true experience, if I'm writing a young adult or something that's a bully, whether it's military or not, like, how does that look from high school to, like you said, a kid fighting, right? What happens to the bully? What happens to, do they become part of the team, et cetera, and that kind of thing, if you have any experience in that?
Yeah, so bullying is actually really different as well, and maybe I'm making excuses for it as I say this too. We all know about hazing and hazing in the military, like that. There was a big push when I was in to stop that. Like, and I even got in trouble a few times for making soldiers do push-ups because of their mistakes. It's just what you did, right? Granted, if you're making them do something, you have to explain why it's wrong, just like you do with the child, right? But they went to a paperwork style army, and that's what they wanted instead of physical activities. But with bullying, like, it doesn't matter how bad I was bullied, I still would have died for those guys. They still would have died for me. Like, and I think that's where it's different, where it becomes a culture thing. It becomes a thing where, like, you legitimately just haze each other because you're bored. You got nothing else to do. And there was times where I had to deal with situations that a kid came up to me and be like, hey, this soldier keeps making fun of my mom because she's gay, and I don't like that. And right away, it was like, okay, we're done. Like, you bring that shit up again, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. Like, he said he doesn't like it. It's off limits. Like, you have to respect him as a human being. And so I think that's where it's a little different, where, you know, I feel like a high school bully is someone who has had far more complicated issues of being inferior in other situations and wants to be that. I think bullies coming into the military, especially in the beginning, they get put down, but there's going to be a time and place where they're going to be able to be that bully again, to be on top of again. So I think it's an interesting play there to show that bully be at the bottom and then come back and see if they change or see if they don't.
Brent?
So I'm going to ask this based on just my own background and being around people who have left the military. What do you miss?
Man, I miss my worst memories because they're also my fondest. For example, we went out to a training site. We were supposed to be there for a week. We're in Louisiana, monsoon season in Louisiana, and we're about to hit with a 3-day storm. So we go out a day early. But the range we went to that we were supposed to sleep at, we're supposed to sleep in some, we call them Connexes, right? Railroad cars. We were supposed to sleep in them, but there's no one, it's still occupied. So I sat in the rain, in monsoon rain, Louisiana, on my pack with my dudes, talking about how much our life sucked at that moment. One of my best memories. Like, because it sucks so bad that you can't help but laugh. Like, I remember time in Afghanistan, it was so hot, and they had me on a gravel road, and I just laid there and almost passed out. Miserable moment. I hated my life. Now I look at it, it was like, oh man, I'd go back to Afghanistan in a heartbeat. Like, I'd go put my kit back on. So I miss the memories you create with people due to shitty circumstances.
Yeah, that you sound like every other soldier I've ever known. They always miss those things. So I asked the question already knowing the answer, but I just wanted to see if it would hold true. So,
yep.
Can I throw one more thing out there real quick? Because I've been around you when you've answered these questions before, when it's writing specific and it's about the military. You know, we've talked how many times about, you know, sensitivity readers and stuff like that, beta, you know. So how do you deal with people coming to you for sensitivity reads around the military, asking you even just random questions like I've asked you? I'm writing, you know, the book I'm writing, I've leaned on you and a couple other folks who I know in the military as well, but like, I know how I feel sometimes if I don't have the bandwidth to deal with somebody coming to me like, hey, can you read this thing and tell me if I'm being racist? Like, not that they're saying that, but you see where I'm going.
Well,
with this,
I mean,
right?
that's literally what I ask you every time. Marshall, does this sound racist?
But you know what I mean? Like, is that something, like, does it bring stuff up for you, or how do you deal with that? I
actually love sensitivity reads. Grain of salt here. No one's written a PTSD story and asked me to read it though. So I haven't had the opportunity to experience that. Most of the time people will be like, oh, you're military? Cool. Did I get this aspect right? Did I get this aspect right? You know, and usually it's around rank structure and like command chain and stuff like that. Yeah. You know, and it hasn't been too difficult. I'm always happy to do it. You know, when it comes to writing a military character, like, I always make them dynamic. Like, we're not single-celled organisms. Like, we're not what you see on TV. Like, you know, we're an everyday person that likes football, likes cooking, maybe has multiple wives on the side, like, or husbands. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're just everyday people. We just happen to wear a uniform, you know, and answer to the government. But again, my experience is different than yours. It is different someone saying, hey, is this racist? And you having, kind of look at that and reflect on your experiences versus, what I had to deal with and people asking about rank and structure and organization. And I'll say this, if you have a made up world and a made up military and it's not reflective of any current world military, don't ask the military person to read it. Because at that point, it is strictly what's in your imagination and whatever works for you works. Unless you specifically want to base it on a current military. Any other questions, huh?
I got a little fun one, so to maybe pull back and lighten it up a little bit. All right, so
I got a little dark there.
Yeah, it's okay. In terms of, so like when you read these big battle scenes in like science fiction or fantasy, what's one thing that you wish that you would either see more of or see less of when writers are like constructing these things?
Tactics. If I can look at your scene and be like, what about this giant area you didn't talk about over here? Like it is the biggest thing. Look at basic military tactics. We've got tactics from time of Jesus, like even beyond. Like as long as we've been recording stuff, people have recorded military tactics and battle tactics, and they change over time. What we did in Vietnam versus what we did now is because of the mistakes we made in Vietnam. What we do in the next war is because of the mistakes we did in Afghanistan and Iraq. Military speaking, tactically speaking, not politically. So I think tactics is a huge thing for me. Is like, if I can look and like see a battle scene, movies are the worst, but like if I can read a battle scene and I can find 3 or 4 loopholes that you're not talking about that I feel like would have been exploited against your characters, that's an issue for me. And I'm happy to point it out, but I think with battle tactics, you got to draw it out. If you don't have experience, draw it out. We used to sandbox every mission that we did. We literally would draw in the sand, hey, you're here, here, and here. We're doing this and this. We're forcing the enemy to do this to accomplish this. I think you got to do the same thing. If you're going to have a big battle scene, you better draw it out and you better think of you better think like the enemy. Once you plan the good guy side, you got to turn around and you got to plan the bad guy side. What are they going to do to counter all these things that you just did? So, and I think, it's a fun game of Battleship with yourself.
Yeah. No, that sounds like an easy way to raise the stakes for your story, though. So, yeah. I think it's a good tip.
Well, I guess we're at that mark.
Yeah. Old Father Time is swooping in, boys.
I know.
We got like 5 minutes left.
Well, what I was going to say is I think we need to do another episode a couple months from now. Let this one sit because, we didn't get to ask. I wanted to ask Brent some questions about, being raised in a military family and having to go through that. So I think we should do another episode and go a little deeper with Nick with whatever subject within that realm he wants to go. And then also whatever Brent wants to actually talk about being raised in the military, because I think characterization wise, writing wise, it is just, the military is just more than just a soldier. It is the people around you and how it affects.
Or you weren't ready to answer? I missed
no,
part
I was ready. I was
like, do we want to throw a couple out there? I did start the recording about 5-6 minutes early. I'm just trying to figure out.
Okay, we can totally. Nick, I'm gonna bow to Nick because I know Nick had specific questions that he wanted to ask.
I've had the pleasure of working with military dependents, children of military members and stuff like that. And I know how lonely and hard it can be at times. But I kind of want to ask you, what was the best thing about it? And then also, what was the worst thing about it?
The best thing about it was that I got to see so much more of the world than I think most kids my age would have gotten to see. I got to live in Central America for 2 years. I've lived in Alaska, seen the Aurora Borealis. I've lived in Hawaii. I've seen lava out of volcanoes. I've seen some crazy, incredible things that I think, someone wouldn't normally see in their childhood. And I think that has made me a much more like, I would say, globally minded person. I don't know if that's the right phrase for it, but I'm not like, I know America and the West isn't the center of the world. And, I also know that we're not the grand heroes that we like to make ourselves seem to be. So yeah, that's the best thing. The worst thing.
You can pass on this one too, because I know
No,
it can get dark.
I can answer it. The worst thing was never having anything permanent, really. Like, I hear people all the time talk about, oh, I've had this friend since kindergarten, or I've had this friend since third grade. I don't know where a single person from my third grade is doing. In fact, I had 3 third grades. When people talk about things like high school reunions, I went to 2 high schools. I don't have any value in those things. Or like, people talk about, oh, I grew up with my cousin. I have a favorite cousin. I don't have that. I didn't grow up with my cousins. I maybe saw them once a summer, So, yeah, the only permanent things were my immediate family. And and I think it's weird. It plays out in certain things. Like for me, like I live pretty sparsely. I don't have a lot of things. And it's because I understood from a very early age that people and things don't last. And it's also, it cascades into many areas of my life. And I know, like, sometimes, like, I know to some people, like, they think, like, I can be kind of really detached from emotions and things. And it's like, yes, I am detached sometimes because, that was a survival mechanism. You can only go through so many heartbreaks as a kid. You can only lose so many best friends. You can only lose so many favorite teachers or and it was like over and over and over again. Like there's literally not a single grade or a single like section of school where I actually had one school. So I think I had like 2 kindergartens, then 3 third grades, 2 fourth grades, 2 fifth grades. I had and then I had, high school split in half. I had to go to a different high school my last 2 years. So it's like literally there was just nothing ever was permanent for me. So if that was, that would be the worst thing.
Consistently inconsistent.
Yeah. 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 So that's definitely the part. And and there's so much. I mean, we'll probably talk about this on the next episode. But there's like so much guilt, and it just wrapped up in these things, and then your relationships with your parents and how it plays out, and it's there's definitely a lot to deal with. Yeah.
Oh, for sure, and I get a lot of what you just said too, because I got to experience that as an adult, but not as a child.
Yeah, and that's why I'm surprised my brother joined the military. To be honest, because part of me was like, you didn't get enough when we were kids, but it's a thing. Yeah,
it's not uncommon to see a child follow in a parent's footstep if they experienced it for so long, because it's what they're used to. It's the normal.
Oh yeah, no, there's not a war Lambert hasn't fought in. From World War I to present, we have had a Lambert in every single American conflict.
There's
like
a
my
good
grandfather
chance,
was in World War II.
Good chance our family fought side by side and we didn't know it. Because my mom,
literally,
we go back Revolutionary War. We've had a family member always there.
Yeah, I don't know how. I know World War I. I don't know if anything beyond that, but like from them to now, there has been a Lambert in every single one. And I mean, we knew my little brother was gonna go, but I was not going to go. I was like,
perspective on that. That's every other generation, if you're lucky. Because this last war, there's been some people who had a baby that first year while they were deployed, whose child has gone over there as well.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of this episode and what we've talked about my personal experiences, a little touch on my service, but my experiences with PTSD coming out of the service and transitioning back into civilian life. What I want to say in regards to writing is don't be afraid to write military characters. As like, if you are listening to this show, I'm your sensitivity reader. Email me, hit me up on the show. I'm happy to do so. But I hope you guys understand. Okay, I'll charge $5. I'm selling myself short. Okay, it's fine.
$5
I need soda. But I hope you guys can kind of look at this and know that this is my situation. This is my experience. There's a lot of good interviews out there that if you are writing military characters, go over those interviews. But I'm happy to read anybody's stuff out there. I'm happy to keep continuing this conversation. I've been on panels for PTSD at conferences, with psychologists there nonstop and with a couple other writing conferences around here as well. But just hope you guys got a lot out of this and I didn't scare you away from writing anything.
All right, Nick. So tell me, what keeps you writing?
Oh man, what keeps me writing is you guys. And I'll be honest here, like you guys are a big support system for me, but like I like writing stories that have an emotional impact on others. And that's kind of like where I'm finding my superpowers, emotions and characters and stuff like that. So I like, what keeps me writing right now is the hope that I will publish something that at least one person in this world will pick up and it change their life.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.